Dog Works Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dog Works. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com. You can support this podcast on patreon.com/First Paw Media. Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Robert Forto, and you're listening to Mushing Radio here on KVRF 89.7 in the Matsu Valley. RadioFreePalmer.org is our live streaming site. You can find all of our episodes over on dogworksradio.com. And be sure to check out our social media at Dogworks Radio and at dogworksradio.com. And today I am joined by the Iditarod crew with Toni Reeder and Alex Stein. Toni, how's it going today?
Pretty good, not too bad. It's my first day off, I think, all summer, really. So it's just been pretty quiet this morning.
Very good. And Alex, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. We're sweltering down here in California. It's been close to 100 degrees for a lot of the past 2 weeks, and so I've been looking at a lot of pictures of sled dog races in the snow in order to try to cool myself down.
Very good. Well, as we said, it's beautiful up here right now. It's in the mid-50s up here in the Matsu Valley. And what's good, and I know, Toni, you can talk a little bit about this as well, and that's going to be our first quick topic, is tourism has really rebounded up here in Alaska. We were up in Talkeetna over the 4th of July weekend, and lots of visitors, not a lot of the typical tour bus traffic, but a heck of a lot of visitors there. Toni, I know that you are down in the Kenai, but you're also pretty close to the Seavies and their organization there at the glacier. What's happening with tourism down on the peninsula?
It's picking up the dip netting, so local tourism started in Kasilof earlier this month. And then dip netting for Kenai specifically started this weekend. So I can't get anywhere quickly now. It's just congested. So it's really actually nice to see, as much as I whine about it. It's that normal Alaska summer traffic. And I know so many places on the peninsula that really, really needed this in order to survive. I know for both the CV Kennel and for Trap Fields and Sarasoki, they have had bookings. I think they're booked up all the way through the end of the summer. So that's also a huge positive, especially since they're in Seward, based out of Seward, and they rely so heavily on the cruise ships that they're seeing that many bookings through land tours or just people coming up and doing it themselves. It's a huge positive to the Alaska economy for sure, especially after last year.
You know, Alex, we talked a little bit about this over the last two Iditarods, being the Iditarod 2 years ago was right smack dab at the start of COVID. And of course, last year, sort of in the tail end of the pandemic. But we talked a lot about how a lot of these folks depend on tourism for their income, and that could have been a driver of signups for last year. And I know signups were quite a bit down compared to years past, and in particular this year, I think we're really seeing a rebound in that, don't you?
I really do. I had thought that there would be even more people would sign up on the first day. I think there were, at the end of the first day, I think there were about 48 or 49. It's up to around 52 now. But I think that is good, and I think it's healthy. As is the case in a lot of areas of the country, I think people are still trying to figure out what the lay of the land is going to be going forward in terms of how open things are and in terms of their own financial situation. Last year, meaning 2020, there was a significant discount given to people who signed up relatively early for Iditarod. They didn't do that this year, or at least if they did, I'm not aware of it. But still, to have 52 people at this point, it seems good and seems very healthy to me. There's always a lot of people who sort of dribble into entering between the picnic and the deadline for when the entry fee goes up, which I think is December 1st, and then a few more after that. But to have this number now seems to be very good, especially compared to last year when it wasn't clear for a very long time if the race could be run or how the race could be run. And, the ITC and Rob Urbach wound up figuring that out and in my opinion, doing a very, very good job under really difficult circumstances. So I'm looking forward to it, and I think that we're going to see a healthy field by next March. And also, it's the 50th running next March, so I think there's a little bit more cachet with being part of that as opposed to being part of, Iditarod 52. So I think it's going to be good. I don't think it's going to be the kind of, gigantic record-breaking field that we've seen in the past, where there have been, like 95 or 100 people entering. But I think it's going to be good, and I think that's a good sign for the sport.
If we could, guys, let's take just a step back. And before we talk about the picnics and the sign-ups, I want to mention a couple other stories. The first one is really the first Iditarod qualifier of the year, and it's held up here in the Mat-Su Valley. It's a Kink 200. That's a race that's been around a long time, several decades, and they've had a lot of problems lately, and in particular problems with weather. And when it's that first weekend of the year, it's always held on the first weekend of January. Here we've had hit and miss snow, we've had rain and whatnot, and I know the guys that used to organize the race had real difficulties with that. And just this week or the week before, they announced that they're transferring the operations over to the Kink Trailblazers, which is an interesting sign because it's going to be the same race but a different organizer. Toni, do you have any updates on the Kink 200?
I don't. They've actually been pretty quiet on social media, and with everything going on in my personal life right now, I haven't actually been able to be a bug up anybody's butt to find out. But it is quite interesting, both the Kink 200, and I'm just going to throw in my little race that I love so much, the Tustamina 200, both made announcements earlier this year that they were restructuring and that the races would continue. When, a year or two ago for both races, they were like, we don't know if this is ever going to happen again, guys.
Yeah.
So it's a positive step forward, I think, if they can get organized, which we know in the sport of mushing is sometimes hard to do. But to get organized and for the weather to cooperate, because that's been the biggest problem for both Kink and for the Tustamina 200, is just the lack of snow and frozen river.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm glad to hear about the Tustamina 200. I forgot all about that one. So, Toni, there's an event down in your neck of the woods called the Mount Marathon. And I know that you had posted some thoughts about that because a couple of mushers ran in that race. And one of them in particular, Dallas Seavey, is definitely showing his off-season form. What is the Mount Marathon, and what do you know about some of the folks that ran in it this year, in particular with the mushing connections?
Sure. So Mount Marathon it's another one of those people that are bred differently, that decide to do crazy feats of running and death-defying stuff. They run up a mountain called Mount Marathon. in Seward, they start from 4th Avenue and run up the mountain and run back down or roll back down or fall back down. It takes the winners a little less than an hour to get down or up and down the mountain. And I know some mushers, they've done it just as a fun little thing to do. For Dallas, he says it's off-season training. My understanding was he told some of his family he was not running it this year, and then they looked on the roster, and there he was. And so there's a little bit of a race just for the CVs because Tyrell's wife, Tekla, also runs it, and then Conway, the youngest non-mushing family member, also runs it. And so there's a little race within the race because it's always Tekla who beats the boys, and everyone loves that. But it was really good. They had to cancel it last year because of COVID, and this year they restructured it so that the runners went in waves of up to 50 people, I think, per wave, and they went in 1 or 2 minute intervals. So it was kind of like a mushing competition or race, just because you had to wait until the times were adjusted because there's no like little 24-hour mandatory break to do your layover math. But it was a really interesting race, really good, really fast, I think, this year. And it was just nice to see, again, something that Alaskans look forward to. Normally it's on the 4th of July. They pushed it back so that crowds were a little less, and they did it in the middle of the week last week. But overall, it was really great. I watched it instead of did work in my office. So.
And speaking of Conway, CV, he comes from that mushing background as well, not only as a family, but I believe he has a couple of junior Iditarod championships. I think he won one of the years that my daughter ran, and he decided to move on to bigger and I guess they could say better things by doing other things. But boy, there's a lot of generations in those CVs that have run Iditarod or junior Iditarod, isn't there?
Yeah, there's, I think, 3 generations so far, and I think some of Mitch's grandchildren have hinted that they might run the junior races, but we haven't seen them so far. I've got my fingers crossed, though, because we need some girl CVs in the mix.
So one last thing about Mount Marathon, it does have a little bit of lore to it. It's a race that you sort of have to qualify for. Like Iditarod, you have to do some other races, and there's a lottery that takes place to get a spot. But if I remember correctly, either Toni or Alex maybe can help me out here. Didn't a racer run a few years ago and was lost and was never found? Is that right?
That's correct.
Wow. Yeah, they searched for her for several days, and they don't know if she fell down a crevasse or something happened to her, but they never found her body. Isn't that right?
Well, it was a guy, not a girl.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Apparently he went up the mountain too fast, so he was technically withdrawn from the race. Volunteers on their way down the mountain saw him, and he had decided to continue up. But he never came back down, or if he did, no one knows how he did or where he came down or where he is. So it's an interesting little story, you know. In all of the years, I think they ran 90 something races, I think, over the years, and it's only been canceled a couple of times. It's the only known mysterious story there. Most people just come down battered and bloodied. They don't disappear. So
I see a Discovery Channel program in the near future, the mysteries of Mount Marathon. What do you think, Alex?
I would watch that. I did not realize that, and that is both a little bit scary and a good reminder that when you are dealing with really when you're dealing with the great outdoors, especially the great outdoors in Alaska, this is not without its risks. And we've been very lucky in terms of people getting people not getting too badly hurt in Iditarod, although there have been a lot of people who've been hurt, but we've been very lucky that No human lives have been lost in Iditarod, but it is just a good reminder that even though you can be very well prepared and can be in good shape and can be capable of doing amazing things, you don't want to mess around too much with Mother Nature.
For sure. All right, guys, let's turn it over to the picnic. The Iditarod Volunteer Picnic and sign up is held, I believe it's the last Saturday of June each year. I know, Toni, you were there, and we're going to get your report from the event here in just a second. But as you mentioned, Alex, well over 50 people have signed up so far. Several names that I have not seen before. But what's more interesting, and I think hope for the future, is we see a lot of international mushers back on the list, and in particular, folks from Canada. I know that they were really had a hard time getting up here last year with travel. I know that some of the folks had to pay extra fees to get their dogs here on planes and whatnot. But what do you think so far, Alex, about not only the international travelers or mushers, but also some of these rookies who we may have not talked about before?
Yeah, I was looking over the list before we went on air, and it looks like, and I may have miscounted, so forgive me if I did. Looks like we've got 12 rookies so far, 18 women I counted, which is always a good sign if there's close to half of the field is women. Sometimes it's a lot less, so that's good. There are a bunch of really familiar names, including, several, both Mitch and Dallas Seavey are going to be running. Martin Boozer is running. There's a bunch of, what I call the sort of successful journeyman mushers who have run the race like 5 times or more and are sort of names that if you follow the sport, you're familiar with, even if they haven't necessarily had top 5 finishes. So, there's a lot of people whose names should be familiar to followers of the sport. I'm very glad to see that our pal Meredith Mates is entered. Lev Schwartz entered again this year. And then we've got, people like Keith Kaiser and Nick Pettit and a lot of people like that. But it's always a good sign when you can start bringing in the European mushers. There's a musher from Denmark and a bunch of people from Norway. So I think these are good signs for the health of the race. Thomas Werner, who won a few years back, and didn't race last year because of difficulties getting to Alaska, is entered again. So I think it's going to, when all is said and done and everything is taken out, I think it's going to be a really good and diverse field. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, me too. And I'll give my thoughts here in just a second. Toni, I know that you were at the event, and I want to get an idea of what that's about. But did you notice anybody that is typically there that didn't show up this time? It's a lot of people really make a big deal about being at the picnics every year for signups. And, they're there no matter what to sign up and hopefully win that entry back. Of course, Ali Zirkle is not there because of her retirement. But was anybody else noticeably absent?
Most of the Fairbanks mushers that even signed up on race day, they weren't actually at the picnic. It was more of the Matsu and the Kenai Peninsula area mushers that were there. Some of the people that have signed up past the picnic date, they were also there just kind of milling around. But for the most part, a lot of your familiar faces were there. You had the Barrington twins. Martin Boozer was there. Dee Dee Johnrow showed up, even though she wasn't signing up, of course. Dan Seavey was there. Dick Mackey was there. Lance, I don't know if he plans on running this year or not, but of course he was not there. I think he had a race that weekend or something, a car race. But a lot of your familiar faces weren't there. Meredith wasn't there just because she was on the glacier. She's doing tours for the CDs. But many of the names that are on the list, as I kind of just scroll up and look, many of the really big names, Erin Burmeister and Michelle Phillips. Well, she's in Canada. She couldn't actually come, but they chose to either mail in their registration or they signed up online. I think that just, with it being a summer that nobody knew what to expect as far as tours and stuff, that's kind of what I heard throughout the picnic, was everyone was shocked that either they had a lot of business or they were still trying to navigate how to get business to their kennel when they don't have the big cruise tour buses and stuff like that. But yeah, no, I mean, we had we had Dallas, we had Mitch, we had several of Martin Boozer again, several of the returning champions there, as well as a lot of fan favorites. Who we're missing were more of your volunteers and your fans that are there year in and year out. Most fly in from other places just to come to the picnic. And with COVID, travel is still just a little bit too difficult for a lot of people. So it was well attended, but it was a smaller attendance than what I've experienced at the picnic.
If I remember correctly, Toni, I believe they do a summer Iditarod Teachers Conference at about the same time, mm-hmm. and that's part of the kind of the festivities of the picnic. And my neighbor and Iditarod finisher Vern Halter takes a big part in that up in his kennel, which is just literally down the road from us. So Toni, you were at this picnic. You go up there quite often to partake in that. This is a little bit more than a sign up, where you can come and just drop off. A lot of things are happening, including that entry for a potential rebate of your entry fee. Can you kind of give us a quick lay of the land of what this event is about and why it's such a tradition with Iditarod?
Sure. I don't actually know the history of when it all started or how it all started, but it really started with being a volunteer thank you. For longer than I think I've been involved, they've just wanted to say thank you to the volunteers, so they call it a picnic. I think it's more of a barbecue. They're grilling burgers on a grill. I know that's not traditional barbecue, but it's a barbecue, not a picnic, guys. There's no picnic blanket. But it's free food. Y'all come, bring your family. Let's just have a celebration that we had a fantastic race back in March, and let's look forward to the next race. They used to pair it with an Iditarod Trail Committee. It was their annual meeting and voting for the different board members and all of that. That changed a few years ago after the big board of directors shakeup that happened as the aftermath of the whole doping thing that I won't get into. Again, so many emotions. But so it starts off now with mushers registering throughout the morning and the afternoon. They cut it off about 2 p.m. for any of the mushers that stay through the whole barbecue. Their names are entered into a drawing. They can win booties, they can win dog food bowls and a dog food ladle. And then why they're all really there is 2 mushers get chosen to win their entry fee back. And so, $4,000 goes a long way. So it's kind of incentive to keep the mushers there so that the mushers will stay and the fans, the volunteers can kind of mingle with them and talk with them, get autographs. I know I'm chatty on here, but I'm not one of those that can go up to people, even people I know, So I just kind of hang back, take pictures, and eavesdrop on conversations. You have people like Dan Stevie and Dick Mackey who go because they love this race so much. Not just because they have family members in the race, but they were there at the first race. They were there before the race started, helping Joe Sr. start this race, get it off the ground. They come and you can hear, they always tell the same stories every year. And every year I sit and listen to the stories. They talk about the good old days when the race was more than just a race. And, you see the mushers that don't get to really talk throughout the year until they come to this. They all kind of congregate together and you see the little cliques within the community, and fans get together. It's one of the only times I never recognize anybody because they're not in their parkas. And I recognize based on parka color. So it's a fun, it's relaxed, it's laid back. The Reddingtons have their little dog sled tour that goes around the property going on at that time. So you get to mingle with all sorts of Iditarod history, past, present, and future. So it's a lot of fun.
Excellent. Alex, I know you and I have talked about it over the last few years about how Iditarod is really becoming a year-round sport in kind of in concert with some of the other professional sports like the NFL and so on. And this kind of sums that up, being it's kind of in the middle of the year and sort of the start of the new. So I'm going to do what I normally do on this show, Alex, and it's going to be interesting to hear what Toni has to say. But as we stand right now, who are your favorites for 2022?
Oh, man. I thought to myself, well, it's way too early. You're not possibly going to ask me that. But here we are. So I'll preface this by saying that all of my predictions are almost always wrong. So, but I don't let that stop me. So I think that we're going to see very, very strong races next year from Jesse Royer and Michelle Phillips, Thomas Werner, obviously, and the Stevies. And I think between those, however many it is, 5 or 6 teams, the winner will be one of those. I think it would be hard to root against Dallas because he's just so strong, and I think he's really stepping up to the prime of his Iditarod career. And I think the next 4 or 5 years are going to be where he is going to have the strongest performances, probably of his lifetime. But having said that, he's also competing this year against Mitch, and Mitch took last year off, and they sort of combined their kennels to form a sort of TV super kennel. And then Dallas picked the best dogs out of all of those. So I would say it's one of those. But before we run out of time, I just wanted to mention one quick story that people who are on Facebook have probably seen. But those of you who might have missed it, it's really kind of cool, which is that, as Toni mentioned, 2 of the mushers get their names chosen to get their $4,000 fee back. Mm-hmm. And this year, something that was, at least I'd never heard of it before, I think definitely unusual, if not unprecedented. Ryan Olson and Riley Deich decided that they would throw in together. So they would they made this agreement that if either one of them was picked, that they would split the $4,000 returned to them. So neither of them would get $4,000 back, but if either one of them won, they'd both get $2,000 back. I guess if they were both picked, they would get $4,000. But then Riley was picked and then split the $4,000 with Ryan Olson, and Ryan reported that Riley was not upset about doing this, but said afterwards, I think the reason that I was picked is because we had extra good luck for combining our fortunes together. And I always love stories like that, and it's just I think it gives you a sense of a little bit of an inside baseball view of the Iditarod, but I think it also gives you a strong sense of the relationships between mushers, and a lot of these mushers, especially mushers who've been at it for a long time, both in terms of Iditarod and in terms of their overall mushing and training careers. You get to know people very, very well, and there are bonds, and there are friendships, and there are rivalries, and I think it's really, really cool, and I think it gives you kind of an insight into the sport that you might not get just from looking at stats and finish times and things like that.
Yeah, I love stories like that as well. Alex, before I turn it over to Toni to give her picks, you had mentioned sort of the journeyman of Iditarod, those well-known middle of the pack folks. Do you see anybody right now that can really make a big push? That sort of been climbing up in the ranks and maybe a big time contender this year?
I'm going to go back to Michelle Phillips and Jesse Royer, and I think for both of them, they're closer to the front of the pack than the middle right now. But it seems like either of those two, with certain things going their way and with some luck, could really, if not win the race, then be right up there in the top 2 or 3.
My dark horse this year is Mats Peterson. He's been out of the race for several years, and he's back. I think he's been 5 or 6 years maybe since he's ran Iditarod, but I believe he's going to be one of those folks that really makes a push up there, and that's sort of my prediction. And otherwise, sort of up in the air, like you said, Alex. It could be anybody. It could be Mitch. It could be Dallas. It could be Nick. It could be Jesse. It could be Millie. It could be a whole bunch of folks that could take it this year. It'd be very interesting to see if Dallas can get his 6th win this year, especially on the 50th anniversary with that whole CV dynasty that we've talked a lot about. So let's turn it over to Toni. We're just about out of time, Toni. I don't mean to cut you off short, but who are your predictions, and do you have a dark horse or a journeyman that can journeymen or journeywomen that could really make a push this year and really move up in the ranks?
Okay, well, I'll just preface this by saying I'm bad at predictions because whoever I pick ends up getting jinxed, so I'm blaming you if any of their races go to hell in March. But I will agree with Alex's list. I would add Aaron Burmeister. He really challenged Dallas this last year, and I still stand by if they had gone from Anchorage to Nome and not just, the up and back that we had to do this year, I think Aaron would have been Iditarod champion this year.
Interesting.
So I expect he threw it down in an interview after his race ended in March. This is going to be his last race. It's the 50th Iditarod. He's a hometown hero in Nome. It'd be a really great story, just like Dallas's 6th win would be a great story. I think Aaron's would be even better. And then not really sure if Ryan can make it, but Ryan Reddington, his whole theme this year for his race is Reddington's Run, which is a takeoff of Hobo Jim's song about Joe Reddington Sr. and the Iditarod that he wrote after Joe's passing. Ryan's hungry for it. No Reddington has won it. And if any Iditarod story was going to be the Iditarod story, having Joe's family finally get that win on the 50th, that would be that would break the internet, I think. So that's kind of my feeling. I don't want to sit there and say anybody's got the best chance. This is, I think, an even more competitive field than last year or 2 years ago. It's just insane how strong Iditarod mushers and teams are now. It used to be just a handful, and now I'm looking at it, I'm like, I'm going to have to start picking my top 20 and not my top 10 because there's so many names that all it takes is just that one special moment and they've got it.
So did you mention your dark horse there, or your really big come up musher that's going to really make a move?
I think Aaron's kind of the dark horse. Either he's going to be right there up front, or he's going to have, one of his. But I think I don't know that he's the dark horse, but he's my question mark. He's going to be brilliant. I think he's going to be brilliant. But we also have to mention Brent Fast. Yeah. I think Brent's right up there too.
Very good. So Toni, before we go, I understand that you have compiled one heck of a list of races and mushers. I know you did some of that last year. Can you tell us quickly about what you've got in the works here in the off season?
Sure. So I have no life, or normally I have no life, and I have a blog called Writer's Block. It's a play off of my last name. You can find it at tonishell.blogspot.com. And right now I've got just a few write-ups from some of the stuff that we've talked about, but the one that's really popular in the off season is my race season schedule. I go through the list of Yukon Quest and Iditarod qualifier races, as well as a few others that fans and Iditarod mushers have suggested I add. And I put their dates, I link their website and their social media so that fans can put it on their calendars. And then I just spent the last couple of nights putting them all together on a Google Calendar, which is also linked on my blog. It's just something to keep it all straight. I could not remember all of the dates if I tried, so this helps me more than anything else, and I know it helps a lot of other readers as well.
So
it's such a great resource, and it's every year. Like I remember, Robert, 4 or 5 years ago, we would always have the thing where we would say, "Oh yeah, all of this information is out there. It's possible to have it. There's no real central place where you can find all of it." So having this resource that you've put together, and I know that it was time consuming at the very least to track all of this stuff down, but having it in one place is so helpful and really such a great service for the mushing community and for fans.
And I don't know if folks still bookmark things on their web browsers, but I guess this would be one that you should do for sure. So, Alex, speaking of social media, where can folks follow you? And also, put in a quick plug for your book that came out. Did it come out over this COVID break that we had?
Yeah. So my book is Tales from the Trail, short fiction about dogs, mushing, and sled dog races. It came out just about a year ago. I think it was the very beginning of July or the end of June. And it is a series of about 20, a little more than 20 pieces of short fiction. You can read one at a time, or you can barrel through and read it all at once. It's available on Amazon. And the best way for people to get a hold of me is on Twitter. I'm on Twitter a lot, and I am at Coldfoot Films.
Very good. And Toni, where can folks find you?
They can find me on pretty much any social media platform, but I'm mostly posting musher stuff on Twitter, and I'm at Toni Shell AK.
Very good. And I am at Robert Forto on all the social medias under the same name. And our podcast is at Dogworks Radio on all social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter as well. Guys, thank you very much. It's always fun to catch up. I love hearing the stories, the news, the notes, the predictions. Here we are in the middle of July and thinking about racing that's going to be happening starting in January. So thank you very much for joining us today, Alex and Toni, and I hope to talk again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And on behalf of my co-hosts, Toni and Alex, this is Robert for Mushing Radio. We will see you guys next time. Goodbye.
From Dogworks Radio, this is Mushing Radio. We hope you enjoyed this episode. And we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you'll see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your hosts are Alex Stein and Robert Forto. Our producer is Robert Forto, created for DogWorks Radio.